At the train station, Theodore, the Duke of Battenberg, was reading a letter from his grandmother, filled with reproaches and instructions. She lamented that he hadn't replied to a single one of her letters, and because of it, her heart had turned to ash. His grandmother knew about his upcoming summer leave and wrote how much the entire royal family was looking forward to his return. At her insistence, he was to immediately address a marriage proposal sent from the palace upon his arrival, which only caused a dull irritation in Theodore. With a wry smile, Theodore Liam Battenberg thought that his grandmother still hadn't given up on her lingering hopes. His aide asked with concern if it was another letter with a marriage proposal, to which Theodore wearily replied that it had become an annual event. He was already sick of it, the constant talk of dates and marriage. The aide noted that the commander didn't seem interested, even though love letters flew into the Admiralty every day. The subordinate didn't understand why Theodore was so against it, as he could get married at any moment. Theodore, adjusting his cap, asked in return if he didn't find it all dreadful and hollow. He was talking about love, considering it complete nonsense, and quickly changed the subject, asking his aide about his vacation plans. The aide, whose name was River Ross, replied that he was heading south to Gloucester Castle. His uncle worked as a gardener for the Somerset family and needed extra help, so River planned to spend his vacation helping him. Theodore listened thoughtfully to the stories about the castle's fresh air and the nearby river perfect for swimming. The aide's words about a simple vacation awakened a distant memory in him. Some time ago, when he was covered in bandages after an injury, someone had told him that he seemed to have no passion for life. The person was sure that Theodore would continue to live that way, calculating everything in advance. But he wished that just once Theodore would stop calculating everything in his head, and instead try to follow something else: his heart, his impulses, and his desires. That person guaranteed that if he did, something truly wonderful would happen. Returning to the present, Theodore suddenly stopped his aide. He had changed his mind. With a determined smile, he announced that he would join him on this wholesome summer vacation. At the same time, in a luxurious hall, Earl Somerset and an elderly baron were discussing the Earl's niece. The baron was delighted with her beauty and demeanor. And the girl herself, Vanessa Siren Somerset, stood aside with a submissive and sad expression. The baron, rubbing his chin, smiled ominously and said that before proceeding with the wedding, there was something he'd like to do. He wanted to have proof of the bride's purity and innocence. Earl Somerset was outraged, stating that any suspicion towards his niece was an insult to him. However, the baron was adamant, cynically remarking that damaged goods would look unseemly. He promised the Earl anything he desired if Vanessa's purity was guaranteed. The baron added that he knew someone incredibly gifted at sensing whether or not a woman was familiar with men. For Vanessa, everything had changed years ago. After the death of her father, the late Earl Somerset, the title passed to her uncle, Mr. Wyatt, and she lost all rights to the estate. Furthermore, from that moment on, Mr. Wyatt gained complete power over her. He controlled everything she ate, wore, and used, and even her future marriage was in his hands. The lawyer at the time had only wished young Miss Vanessa luck on her future path. Back in the present, Vanessa sighed heavily in the garden. She was to be sold off in a marriage contract the moment she came of age. The word product was the perfect description of her situation. A pomegranate that fell from a branch and shattered on the ground became a bitter symbol. Damaged goods. Those words echoed in her head. Suddenly, she caught the scent of cigarette smoke in the air and looked around in surprise. Someone was in the garden. Wisps of smoke curled between the trees, and her gaze found its source. A man was lounging in the shade of a tree, leisurely smoking. His relaxed posture and piercing gaze mesmerized her. She had never seen him before. Perhaps he was a new gardener? Their eyes met, and Vanessa's heart began to pound, her cheeks flushing. She gathered the courage to speak, but was interrupted by a maid's shout. "My lady!" It was Mary, who had been looking for her everywhere. Vanessa turned to ask her about the stranger, but when she looked back, there was no one behind the tree. He had vanished like a vision. Sometime later, Theodore, disguised as a simple worker, was picking pomegranates with the real River Ross. River noted that she was watching him again. He was talking about Lady Vanessa, who had been following the captain relentlessly for a whole week. River guessed she wanted to say something and advised Theodore to talk to her. Theodore just brushed it off. He was sure it would be another boring cliché about love at first sight. But River insisted that Lady Vanessa truly looked like she had fallen in love with him. He pleaded with Theodore to at least tell her the truth, that he wasn't the gardener River Ross she thought he was. River also recalled that they used to play together as children, though she probably didn't remember him. Then he started complaining again about the squalid conditions the Duke was living in. He couldn't bear to see his commander sleeping in an ordinary garden shed and begged him to move to the nearby villa. Theodore calmly explained that right now he was River Ross, the gardener's nephew. If he started living in luxury, his cover would be blown immediately. And if he was exposed, the news would get straight back to the old man, likely the king or someone from the palace. Then he'd be dragged to that suffocating event and forced into the worst marriage on earth. He assured River that he was actually having a lot of fun and asked him to stop worrying. River stared at his commander in complete bewilderment, unable to understand what fun he could possibly find in this backwater place. Theodore, however, was reflecting that this outdated estate was the perfect place for a secret getaway. Everything here was tasteless. Fruit trees in a formal garden, cheap knockoff paintings in the hallways. Even the family crest was made of copper instead of gold. And yet, Theodore thought that even in this rundown, classless place, there was one thing of real value. And his gaze was fixed on Vanessa. Finally, Vanessa made up her mind. Clutching the broken pomegranate, she approached him. She timidly asked if she could talk to him for a second. Theodore coldly threw that he was a bit busy, but she persisted, calling out his name. River Ross. Mustering all her courage, Vanessa blurted out that she had a proposal for him. He turned, his face expressing nothing but mild curiosity. Her hand holding the pomegranate was stained with red juice, like blood. And then she spoke the shocking words, looking him straight in the eye. I want to buy you, River Ross. How did she come to this? To understand, we must go back 1 week. Vanessa was with her friends, who were suggesting various ways for her to avoid the marriage. Her friend, Rosalind Fabian Winchester, suggested pretending to be insane or acting unbearably rude. Her twin brother, Blair Fabian Winchester, silently read a book listening to their conversation. Rosalind even offered to lend her grandmother's dress, to which Blair caustically remarked that Baron Howard, who was nearly 70, might even like that. Vanessa wistfully recalled their school days when they could joke around without a care. Now, she understood that her uncle had been waiting for her to graduate just to make this deal. Blair suddenly suggested they announce that he and Vanessa were in a relationship. Vanessa immediately objected, as Blair was a man who already had a fiancé. But Blair calmly explained that was precisely the point. A scandal with the heir to the Winchester Marquisate, who was already engaged, would make her marriage to the Baron much less likely. Rosalind quickly clarified that they weren't talking about a real relationship, just creating the appearance of one for a scandal. Vanessa reflected on how the world was changing, yet people were still obsessed with the idea of a woman's purity. Her friends, seeing her despair, promised that if things became too hard, they would help. They were ready to do anything, whether it was running away or disappearing completely. But Vanessa refused. She couldn't drag her friends into trouble because of one marriage. She firmly decided that she needed to find a way to solve this problem on her own. At that moment, her gaze fell upon the garden, where the handsome stranger was working. Her friends noticed her determination. Rosalind said that their Vanessa could be surprisingly brave sometimes, and expressed confidence that she would figure something out. Looking at the man working in the garden, Vanessa learned from her maid that he was Mr. Ross's nephew, named River Ross. He was a naval sergeant who had recently fought in the Battle of Potsdam and received a long leave for it. He had come to the estate to help his uncle during his leave, and his arrival had caused quite a stir among the maids. The name River Ross awakened childhood memories in Vanessa. She remembered a boy named River with whom she used to play. She remembered calling his name and how he would run to her. But the boy from her memory was nothing like this strikingly handsome man. Nevertheless, she decided that since they already knew each other, it would make things easier. She told Mary that if you don't want something to be sold, you have to make sure no one wants to buy it. You have to create a flaw that makes the buyer reject the product. However, the scandal had to be hers alone, without involving her friends. And in that sense, River Ross was suitable in many ways. Besides, physically speaking, he was simply exceptional. Vanessa even thought that perhaps God himself had sent him to save her. She sent Mary away and resolutely walked towards her goal. And so she stood before him, repeating her offer. To become her lover for the summer for a generous reward. Theodore, standing under the tree, demanded she tell him the reason without any pointless formalities. Vanessa, clutching the pomegranate, explained that she needed a scandal to ruin her marriage prospects. And ideally, if a child was involved, it would completely remove her from the marriage market. She promised him complete safety and assured him that as soon as summer was over, it would all become something that had never happened. Theodore rose with a sly smile. He took her hand with the pomegranate and asked what if, even after summer ended. He didn't get tired of her body? His touch and bold words made her freeze. Flustered beyond belief, Vanessa stammered that it wouldn't happen and demanded he show her proper respect as a lady. He scoffed, saying that to demand respect, she should have made a better offer than trying to sell herself cheaply for a bit of cash. In desperation, she confessed that money was all she had to offer him right now. Theodore recalled having recently overheard outraged conversations about a 70-year-old baron visiting the estate that very day. Since he was hidden behind the bushes, the maid couldn't see him and was indignantly complaining that Lady Vanessa was being treated like merchandise. She knew the girl had been put on the market right after graduation, as her uncle's latest business venture had been a total disaster. Vanessa continued to explain her payment plan. She had a pension in her name and could request a payout if she had a child. She would pay him that money over 5 years. She added that she had other ways to make money. But Theodore, casually tossing his bag aside, stated that he understood what a pitiful situation she had ended up in. He made Vanessa flinch back and said that he wasn't exactly desperate for money. His disinterest was unnerving her. Then she decided to play her last card. She knew his uncle, Mr. Ross, was embezzling funds for garden maintenance. She threatened to expose him, thinking it would somehow affect his nephew. But to Theodore, this was just another boring variation of a banal story, the kind that often happened in high society. He was tired of women who swore eternal love and offered to heal his childhood traumas. All those touches and confessions were empty sounds to him. Vanessa's proposal, "I want to buy you," seemed at least more interesting in comparison. Perhaps that's why this woman had piqued his curiosity. He coldly asked what old man Ross's embezzlement had to do with him. Lighting a cigarette, he told her she shouldn't have resorted to such a pathetic threat if she just wanted to sleep with him. She should have just confessed her love. At that moment, he thought he had given her the wrong advice, one that could never work. Vanessa was shocked. She didn't love him, and confessing a lie would be deception. Theodore decided the negotiation was over and started to leave. She stopped him in a panic, asking if all she had to do was love him. He turned to her and said that all of it was pointless if he felt no desire for her. Her face twisted in surprise and humiliation. What did he mean by that? And the next moment, he pulled her to him and kissed her. Her eyes widened in shock. He had meant to humiliate her, but he was suddenly struck by how terribly soft she was. The thought seemed foolish. So what? Do I actually desire this woman? Flashed through his mind. He pulled away. Breathlessly, she asked him how it was. He replied that he didn't know. He decided that this would likely be impossible. Meanwhile, Blair was watching them from the castle window and summoned the butler. He asked who the man with Vanessa was, whom he had never seen before. The butler replied that it must be the gardener's nephew, Mr. Ross, who was in the Navy and on leave. Blair ordered the butler to investigate the man properly. Something about him seemed familiar. Blair's sister, Rosalind, peeked into the room. Rosalind asked if Blair had packed for their grand tour, which was less than a month away. Blair nonchalantly replied that there wasn't much to pack, as people lived the same everywhere. Rosalind sighed, wishing Vanessa could go with them, even when she had offered to pay for everything. Blair reasonably pointed out that nothing could be done. Earl Somerset was in a hurry to settle his affairs by marrying off his niece. He cynically added that perhaps a quick marriage was the fastest way for Vanessa to gain her freedom. After all, it had become common these days to take a lover after marriage. Rosalind sharply cut him off, reminding him that he was talking about their friend. She grew somber, saying that she truly cherished their relationship with Vanessa, their friendship of many years. Rosalind advised him to also think about his own fiancée, an engagement he had chosen himself. Blair quietly replied that he knew that better than anyone. A few days later, Theodore saw Vanessa meeting with another man in the gazebo. River explained that it was Earl Rawdon. It seemed the negotiations with Baron Howard had fallen through. A maid bringing drinks said that Baron Howard would have been better, and began to gossip about the Earl's terrible reputation. According to rumors, he had been married several times and no one knew what had happened to his ex-wives. It was said that he harassed all the maids in his estate and recently had an illegitimate child with a war widow. The maids pitied poor Lady Vanessa, as she was such a lovely person. River asked if there was a reason to push for a marriage with the worst possible candidate. The maid replied that Earl Somerset was simply trying to drag the family's remaining honor through the mud. She explained that every single one of the master's businesses had failed. Now, the only thing he had left to sell was Lady Vanessa. No one could have imagined such a thing while her parents were still alive. In the gazebo, Earl Rawdon was thanking Vanessa's uncle for contacting him so quickly. He grabbed Vanessa's arm, delighted that he had almost missed out on such a wonderful match. He also mentioned that he had heard about her friendship with the young Marquis Winchester. Her uncle quickly assured him there was nothing to worry about, that there was nothing between them. He boasted that he completely controlled his niece's private life, while Vanessa silently cried, listening to this humiliating conversation. Earl Rawdon lecherously grabbed her hand, saying he took his word for it. They agreed that the wedding would take place in the coming autumn. Vanessa was horrified. Her future was painted in the darkest colors. Theodore watched the unfolding scene thoughtfully, but his expression revealed none of his true emotions. Seeing Theodore, Vanessa bolted from her spot and ran towards him, desperately shouting his fake name. She caught up to him, breathless, and said they needed to talk. He coldly replied that they had nothing left to talk about and turned away. "Let's do it again," she blurted out. He stopped, silently waiting for her to continue. She was talking about that kiss. She was sure she could do better this time. He pushed her away, repeating that she didn't attract him. She clung to his arm, desperately informing him that a wedding date had been set with Count Rawdon for the autumn. She would have to go through with the ceremony in the fall. He sarcastically asked why she didn't just go and buy a man if she was so desperate. She replied that she was strictly forbidden from leaving the castle. And although the surveillance inside the castle was lighter, all the servants were hired by her uncle. She was trapped, constantly being watched. He suggested she just run away somewhere far. But she couldn't. Her parents were buried nearby. She was the only one left to look after their graves. He asked with contempt if she was really going to endure all this disgrace for her dead parents, living only to be fodder for high society gossip. Then she timidly asked if he really didn't remember her. They had played together all the time as children. Theodore considered it. Maybe he should just tell her he wasn't who she thought he was. But he immediately realized that she would then just run to the real River Ross and make him the same proposal. And the naive, innocent River Ross would most likely agree. Vanessa continued to explain that she was insisting on her proposal because he was a complete outsider. She thought a scandal wouldn't hurt him much since he wasn't a nobleman and had no honor to lose. If it were a nobleman with a fortune in his place, her uncle would undoubtedly try to marry her off to him by any means necessary. She didn't want that. She honestly confessed that marriage was meaningless to her, unless it was with someone she truly loved. She took his hand again, promising that the scandal would break after he had already left. All the attention would be on her. "This summer," she said, "everything will wither away in just one season." 3 options formed in Theodore's mind. Take her as a commoner, ignore her proposal, and just end his perfect summer vacation. The answer was clear and simple. He still wanted to enjoy his secret escapade here, and she was more than enough for his first time. Suddenly, Vanessa cried out, claiming something was on her back. He gently told her to breathe and take it slow. She stammered that she thought a spider had crawled into her clothes. He leaned in to look. He did indeed see a small spider in her hair. "Well, did you get it?" she asked hopefully. He replied that he didn't know. He said that she probably just mistook a strand of her hair for a spider. She begged him to look again, insisting the spider had crawled inside her clothes. He asked with a smirk if she wanted him to reach in and check. She readily agreed. He couldn't figure it out. Was this a clever trick, or was she just hopelessly naive? Either way, he slipped his hand under her dress, his fingers touching her skin. He whispered in her ear, asking what he should do, as he couldn't really tell what he was feeling. Her heart was pounding wildly. His hand slid lower and she gasped, asking him to stop. He whispered that the spider she was looking for was long gone. "Should we stop here?" he asked, looking into her eyes. Blushing and flustered, she whispered, "No," and asked him to keep going. The next moment, he crushed his lips against hers in a passionate kiss, and she responded with equal fervor. Her mind was reeling. She hiccuped, amazed at how much River had grown up. He was so different from the little boy in her memories. He pulled back and asked if she was confident she wouldn't be crying and clinging to him when summer ended. She proposed a bet on who would end up clinging to whom. He pushed her away, stating that he didn't need a child, and that his body was incapable of making one anyway. He chuckled and suggested they could just enjoy each other for a while. He warned that such behavior might tarnish her reputation a bit. She broke free and declared that she had one condition. While they were enjoying each other, they had to be faithful only to each other. She wanted him to take this seriously, not as a joke or something to be easily discarded, but as if they had become proper lovers. He took her hand and agreed with a smile. He reminded her of her confidence, and she, blushing furiously, confirmed it. She swore to God that even if she died, she would never be the first to say she loved him. He replied that he was looking forward to it, even though he didn't believe in God. He took her hand and asked if they should finish what they started. She had said that summer was short, but in his experience, the southern summer was dreadfully long. Long enough to make an unripe rose bloom abundantly. And bloom again. He thought that she shouldn't have made a bet she was bound to lose, and kissed her again. Later that night, he brought her to the humble garden shed. He said he would get water for her to wash up and suggested she sleep if she was tired. Left alone, Vanessa sighed heavily, her cheeks burning with embarrassment. She remembered their passionate kiss in the garden. She couldn't believe she had done that. With River. Suddenly, her gaze fell on his belongings, and she noticed something. At that moment, Theodore returned with a bucket of water. He found her examining his things and asked what she was doing. She explained shyly that he had many expensive things she had seen in her friends' rooms. She was surprised. Was the Navy salary really that high? He vaguely replied that the pay wasn't exactly low, but she still advised him to cut back on luxury items. He chuckled and said he'd handle his own finances, thank you. He moved to help her wash up, but she tried to refuse, saying she could manage on her own. He insisted, saying there was no mirror and she was a mess in places she couldn't reach. She asked shyly if she really looked that dirty. He replied that she was dirty enough for anyone to tell they had been fooling around in the garden. He took a strand of her hair and noted that, technically speaking, they hadn't actually done anything yet. She didn't understand what he meant. They had kissed in the garden, but they hadn't really gone all the way. He asked with a smile if she expected him to satisfy himself while she was trembling like a leaf. After finishing washing her, he skillfully braided her hair. Vanessa was amazed. The braid was so pretty. She asked in surprise where he had learned to braid like that. He smiled mysteriously and promised to tell her the next time they met. Back in her room, Vanessa ran into a worried Mary who hadn't seen her since lunch. Vanessa lied, saying she had been reading a book and fell asleep in the garden. Mary noticed that her ribbon was covered in grass stains. The maid said they would have to throw the ribbon away. But Vanessa stopped her, taking the ribbon for herself. She said there was no need to throw it away just yet, because she might have a use for it again next time. At the same time, Theodore was thoughtfully examining the towel he was using to dry Vanessa. It seemed as though each of them had kept a piece of what had happened between them. Vanessa was sitting in her room with Rosaline. She announced that she had canceled the boating trip on the Dunster River. Vanessa chided her, as she had been looking forward to the trip and was sad to have missed it last year. Rosaline brushed it off, saying she couldn't go anywhere while her friend was sick, and that she'd much rather stay with her. Rosaline changed the subject, showing Vanessa a newspaper. According to rumors, Duke Battenberg had gone missing. Everyone thought it was a romantic elopement to avoid a marriage alliance with the royal family. Vanessa stared at the blurry photograph in the paper. The man's face seemed strangely familiar for some reason. Rosaline noticed her intense gaze and teased her, asking if she was actually interested in Duke Battenberg. At that moment, Blair walked in, curiously asking who Vanessa was interested in. Vanessa replied that the photo was too blurry, and she couldn't even make out his features. Blair declared that there was no point in being interested in Duke Battenberg anyway. He began listing rumors. His private life was a total mess, and women constantly showed up at the Admiralty gates claiming to be pregnant with his child. He hadn't had his portrait painted since he was 10, and even that one was never shown to the public. Blair was sure there was always a reason for such suspicious behavior. Rosaline scoffed, saying that men always do that. When they see someone better than them, they have to tear him down. Blair seriously told Vanessa to remember, men never do anything without a reason. Vanessa nodded, confused. Rosaline immediately turned it into a joke, saying it was good to be curious about the opposite sex. She told Vanessa to hurry up and get better so she could go on the upcoming outing. Meanwhile, Theodore was handling business over the phone. His assistant reported on business matters and asked if he planned to return ahead of schedule. Theodore firmly replied that he had already said he would be spending this vacation here. The assistant mentioned that the Dowager Duchess, his grandmother, was having a hard time. Theodore told him to tell her to stop her protest and that he would return when the time was right. The assistant cautiously asked if he had by any chance met a lady he was considering marrying, as the rumors said. Theodore's gaze fell on the window, where he saw Vanessa. He thought to himself that he'd heard she was bedridden, but there she was, walking around and looking perfectly fine. He dismissed his assistant's question, saying it was nothing. And then he saw Vanessa, laughing sweetly with Blair. He thought grimly that he probably wasn't the only one she had made a proposal to. He ordered his assistant to forget the wedding preparations. Something more important had come up. He needed him to investigate someone. Debt relations, reputation at school, who she usually hung out with, and her relationships with men. He needed all the information on Vanessa Siren Somerset, every single detail. In a cafe, Vanessa was sharing happy news with her friends. The publishing house had not only signed a contract for her new novel, but had also allocated a separate advertising budget. Rosaline was thrilled, predicting she'd be famous in no time. Vanessa modestly replied that it was all thanks to her friends coming with her. If she had tried to go alone, her uncle wouldn't have allowed it. Blair looked at her seriously and advised her not to work too hard. He said that once she married, her husband's wealth would become hers, so there was no need to exhaust herself to save money. He reminded Vanessa that she would get her pension as soon as she was married. Rosaline suddenly exploded. "Wait, what's with you?" she yelled at Blair. She reminded him that he had promised to do whatever it took to help Vanessa avoid the marriage, and now he had changed his mind. Blair calmly replied that he was just trying to be realistic, as someone close to her. Rosalind didn't back down, saying that Vanessa wasn't doing this to survive, but just to gain some social experience. Then Vanessa confessed her real plan. She was looking for a way to be independent without marriage. All her uncle wanted was the marriage funds, if she could solve that problem first. Blair skeptically asked if she was really not going to get married, reminding her how reckless it was for an unmarried woman to live alone. He added that her uncle would hardly leave her in peace. He asked if there was another reason, like someone she had lost her heart to. She denied it. It was just that she didn't think her late parents would want such a terrible marriage for her. And she didn't want it either. Blair took her hand, suggesting a compromise. She could get married and keep a lover, or just have a child and live in separation. He assured her that marriage might not be as bad as she thought, and that there was always a way to be happy. Vanessa left, feeling betrayed. She knew it would be hard for them to understand. But still, a part of her had hoped. She had thought their bond was stronger than that. Her gloomy thoughts were interrupted by a dog barking. She spotted Theodore playing with a dog by the fountain. He lifted his head and looked at her. He called her by name, and she startled at the sound. "It's been a while, River," she said. "It's been a while, Vanessa," he answered, and somehow the words sounded different this time. That night, she waited for him in the cottage. He brought her coffee and said he hadn't expected her to have the nerve to sneak out. He mentioned he'd heard she hadn't been feeling well. She said she'd been thinking through the next steps of her plan. She brought up what he'd said about infertility. He stretched out on the bed and pointed out that in the conservative South, even a rumor about his fiancée being alone in a garden with a man at night could be fatal to her reputation. She pushed back. Rumors like that didn't make it into the papers so easily, and she needed the publicity. She said rumors could be suppressed, and people's memories faded with time. But once something became a written record, it became permanent truth. He dismissed her ideas about faking morning sickness or emotional instability. She asked, "What if I pretend to be madly in love?" She went red, and he pointed out she was already doing exactly that. He warned her that a poorly thought-out plan would only destroy her life. She stood to leave, saying she'd only come to see him. She wanted him to know she was doing fine. He stopped her, saying she sounded like a merchant trying to prove their reliability to a business partner. He took a strand of her hair, and blushing, she said that if he was busy today, she had plenty of things to do as well. "A novel?" he asked. He let go, and she explained that she needed money beyond her pension. Blair's words floated back to her, that she didn't need to try so hard. She remembered how her friends never understood her desire to work. She asked Theodore if he also thought that kind of work was beneath a noblewoman. He said not at all. Wasn't it better than doing nothing? He asked if she believed in the value of work. She said she believed in the value of money. Her answer made him laugh. He called her name, and when she turned, he pulled her in and kissed her. The next moment, they found themselves on the bed, and he was leaning over her. She tried to protest, but he asked why he should stop. He whispered that his heart was pounding like he'd just run a marathon. They looked into each other's eyes, clouded with desire. Theodore thought that he himself could hardly believe that a single kiss could affect him so much. Suddenly fear gripped her. She remembered his wager. Would she end up clinging to him when their summer romance was over? But there was no turning back now. She gave herself to the moment. Her gentle arms wrapped around his neck, pulling him closer. At that moment, she no longer wanted to be held back by doubt, and was ready to see it through to the end. Looking at her, he wanted to ask why she was so different from everyone else. Unlike anyone who had ever wanted him before, she wasn't cruel, or dull, or unpleasant. And why did he desire her so much, like an ordinary man? He thought maybe he'd known it from the very first time they met, that someday this woman would completely turn his world upside down. And now he found that absolutely wonderful. A few days later, Theodore's cousin Edgar asked if he was really comfortable out here in the middle of nowhere. This was Edgar Lowell Marlborough, Theodore's cousin. Theodore said he was fine, but Edgar kept at it, calling everything around them shabby. He couldn't understand why Theodore had turned down a marriage to a princess just to rot away in this backwater. He guessed Theodore had a secret illegitimate child stashed somewhere, and said he finally understood why their grandmother was so furious. Theodore said flatly that marrying a princess would do nothing for him, and told Edgar to get out if he was going to keep talking nonsense. Edgar smiled slyly and noted something was definitely off. Theodore's whole energy had shifted since they last saw each other. He wondered what it could possibly be. Theodore's gaze drifted to a woman passing by. He thought he saw Vanessa, but it was Haley Morton, and Edgar caught the look. Theodore put his head in his hands, and Edgar pressed on with a smirk. He asked if Theodore wanted to be introduced to that woman. He introduced her as Haley Morton of the Morton House. He pointed out that the Morton House had clear business interests, and that Haley herself was a genuine beauty. A match like that, he said, would certainly put their grandmother at ease. Theodore bared his teeth in a grimace. Edgar advised Theodore to at least try to control his expression. Then Theodore commented on Haley's lovely neck. His cousin was horrified by his brother's behavior, but they had already arrived. As he left, Edgar promised to be in touch soon. Theodore watched his cousin approach Haley. Not alike at all, he thought, comparing her to Vanessa. Even now he could hear Vanessa's voice, breathlessly asking him to slow down. He remembered drowning in her arms like a man possessed. He took a heavy breath and pushed the memory away. After their passionate time together, he returned to his cottage while she was already asleep and brought her something to eat. He sat on the bed and said she must be worn out after all that noise. She flushed and asked him not to tease her. She was planning to leave at dawn since Mary would be looking for her. She went red and promised she'd come back tomorrow night. But he said not tomorrow. He'd be gone for a few days. She grabbed at her clothes, trying to hide her disappointment. Suddenly, Theodore was by her side, gently wrapping an arm around her and smiling playfully. She let out a startled cry. He told her to be good and wait for him, promising to bring back a gift. She thought about how he was doing it again, acting as if they were real lovers. A week passed and she still hadn't seen him. She'd been so lost in her own head that she didn't notice Mary come in until she called out an alarm. Vanessa asked curiously what had happened. Looking flustered, Mary delivered the news. In the parlor, the Earl of Roden was waiting for Vanessa. He noted it was their first meeting since the wedding date had been set. He remarked slyly that his fiancée didn't seem very happy to see him. Vanessa said she was simply surprised. She hadn't known he was coming and her uncle wasn't home. "Ah," the Earl said. "I'm already aware." He said it didn't matter. He had come specifically to see her. He had intended to take things slowly, but it seemed there wasn't time for that. He was a busy man. He told the butler to bring someone in. He introduced the older woman as Madame Luther, a well-known expert in this particular field. Vanessa didn't understand what field he meant. The Earl was surprised her uncle hadn't told her anything. Her uncle had said nothing to her about any of this. The Earl explained it was a necessary procedure for marriages between families of their standing, for trust between spouses and the matter of a future heir. He added that it was better to be certain about such things, since anyone would be disappointed if an expensive purchase turned out to be defective. Vanessa understood. He wanted proof of her virtue. The Earl said what had concerned him was her time at boarding school, and that while the Earl of Somerset had assured him everything was in order, modern women were far too loose. Vanessa jumped to her feet and snapped that he should call off the engagement if he had doubts. She was about to say she'd report this to her uncle when the man grabbed her roughly by the arm. She demanded to know what he thought he was doing. He called her by her full name. "Shut up and sit down," he hissed, forcing her into the seat. He ordered her not to resist and to undergo the inspection. The Earl pretended to soothe her, saying he kept forgetting his fiancée was still young and childishly naive. Madame Luther apologized to the Earl. She explained that her method wasn't an internal examination. That was better suited for doctors. She could confirm purity with a single drop of this holy water. If the body was chaste, the holy water would bead on the skin. But if the body was impure, it would simply run off. The Earl was delighted. Madame Luther asked him to step outside for a moment for the accuracy of the ritual. Once they were alone, Madame Luther told Vanessa to give her her hand. Vanessa said boldly that her method was nothing but a trick. The holy water was only there to make everything look convincing. What actually proved innocence was the subject's own conscience. If the conscience was clean, the hands wouldn't tremble. But if there was something to fear, the hands would shake. And the holy water would run. Madame Luther looked at her with interest. She smiled and said that since the Earl had left without a word, he trusted her completely. So it didn't matter whether Vanessa spilled the water or not. The woman could make up whatever story she liked. Vanessa understood. It was an offer. She said she wanted to buy those words from her. Running out into the rain, she thought that once she would have welcomed a scandal like this. After all, it was exactly the kind of scandal she'd always wanted. But the reason she was so desperately hiding it now? Just then, an umbrella opened over her head. It was Theodore. He asked with concern what she was doing out here. She was hiding it because Because summer wasn't over yet. That night in the cottage, Vanessa admitted her voice was completely gone. He asked why she'd held back. There was no need to. She was afraid they'd get caught, and that was exactly what she'd wanted for the scandal. But if they were caught now, he'd be in danger. Their relationship was supposed to come to light only after he was gone. He said instead of hurting herself, she should have just let go. There he goes again, she thought, acting like we're actually in love. She remembered the conversation with Madame Luther. The woman had refused payment, saying she lived by her reputation. But she'd added that Vanessa should reach out if she found herself pregnant. Madame Luther had promised to give her something to take care of it quietly. Theodore brought her back from her memories, making her promise that she would take care of herself. He had warned her not to give her heart in a relationship that couldn't last forever. Otherwise, she'd only end up getting hurt. The next morning, Theodore asked if she was sure she didn't need to head back. Usually she left early because Mary was looking for her. She said there was a circus in town today. Everyone had gone to watch, so she didn't need to rush. He noticed a hint of sadness in the girl's voice. He asked if she wanted to go to the circus. She was surprised, but he could tell just from her face that she was dying to go. She admitted she did, but was afraid that if she ran into anyone she knew, it would be a disaster. And her uncle would never forgive her. Theodore stared at her as if she had just said the most ridiculous thing in the world. He came over, put a hat on her head, and said they just had to make sure they didn't get caught. They headed out to the fair, where the air was alive with celebration and laughter. She looked uncomfortable, and he asked what she was doing. She admitted the outfit made her self-conscious. She felt like everyone was staring at her. He teased her that for someone so bashful, she sure had bought a whole pile of things. She explained that her friends had birthdays coming up and she'd wanted to get them gifts. She showed him a brooch for Rosalind and cufflinks for Blair. Suddenly, fireworks burst in the sky, and Vanessa let out a breathless gasp of delight. Everyone around them looked up at the lights in wonder. She turned to River, excitedly asking if he'd seen that. She pointed out a firework shaped like a butterfly. He quietly replied that he had seen it, but he still couldn't take his eyes off her. "Liar," she said. She smiled cheerfully and gently teased him, since he had been looking at her the whole time instead of the fireworks. She said it was time to go. The circus was about to start. He thought about how this summer was a fleeting dream, and he didn't dare hope for anything beyond it. After all, this relationship had been wrapped in deception from the very beginning, even if they ever met again someday. Suddenly, someone called out to Theodore. "Captain?" A man in uniform gave him a bow. The man, Second Lieutenant Campbell, said the rumors about his leave in the South had been true. Theodore asked if they knew each other. Theodore tried to brush it off, saying he was Sergeant Ross and the lieutenant must have him confused with someone else. But suddenly Vanessa appeared beside them and called his name. Her voice was trembling. Her face was a picture of complete bewilderment and disbelief. Theodore looked at her, anxious. Had his secret been exposed? Amid the noise and chaos of the fair, Vanessa stood frozen in confusion. Theodore was trying to explain the situation, introducing her as his companion. But to his relief, the girl's distress was caused by the fact that her bag had been stolen while she was distracted. Without a second thought, they ended up at the police station, where Vanessa confirmed to the officer that she had indeed been robbed. She explained it happened at a stall in an alley. The officer nodded sympathetically, noting it was a common trick, and asked for her name for the report. Vanessa froze. Giving her name was tantamount to disaster. A whirlwind of thoughts raced through her mind. If she gave her name, the police would contact her uncle, and her plans would be ruined. Suddenly, Theodore stepped forward and calmly introduced himself as Theo. He stated that he was her companion. With a confident air, he told the officer to contact him if there was any news. He handed the policeman his card. The officer assured them they would be in touch as soon as they found anything. As they were leaving, Vanessa thoughtfully repeated the name Theo, then asked if it was short for Theodore. Theodore said nothing, his expression remaining unreadable. But inside him, a storm of emotions was raging. For some reason, the way she had spoken his real name made his heart race, and a wave of heat spread through his body. Once they were out on the night street, Vanessa asked with curiosity when he had come up with an alias. She repeated the name Theodore with a mix of surprise and delight, as if tasting it. Her words were cut short when Theodore suddenly grabbed her hand. His grip was firm, and Vanessa looked at their clasped hands in surprise, not understanding what was happening. He pulled her sharply into a dark alley, pressing her against a wall. The next moment, his lips crashed onto hers. This wasn't a gentle kiss, but a demanding, desperate one, overflowing with pent-up desire. His mind was screaming. He wanted to touch her, to press her so close he could feel their hearts beat as one, right now. Even if just for a fleeting moment, he wanted this more than anything. In the middle of the empty street under the night sky. A stunned Vanessa tried to pull away, her cheeks burning. She begged him to stop. They were out in the open, but Theodore was relentless. Her pleas mingled with his name, with the name Theodore she had spoken just moments before. Finally, he pulled away, breathing heavily and covering his face with his hand as if trying to compose himself. Their eyes met. Both were flustered, the air crackling with tension between them. Vanessa couldn't look away, her cheeks still on fire when he placed a gentle kiss on her forehead. Theodore, recovering first, smirked and ironically asked what kind of dirty thoughts his lady was having now. Trying to change the subject, Vanessa sadly noted that they never made it to the circus because the tickets sold out too quickly. Theodore chided her, saying she should have told him if she wanted to go that badly. He could have paid extra to get them in. Vanessa immediately started to worry, fretting that if he kept spending money so recklessly, he'd go bankrupt. She called his spending habits terrible. She asked if it wasn't difficult for commoners to save money. He leaned back, listening to her with a faint smile. Is that so? They sat on the parapet of a bridge. Vanessa confessed that she was enjoying all of this because she was tired of life in the castle. She said dreamily that she just wanted to run away anywhere. Her words about running away struck something deep inside him. He remembered a promise made to him many years ago. His mother had also promised to come for him once she was settled. The memory was painful. A little boy, tears in his eyes, looked at his sobbing mother. She clung to him desperately, asking if he understood what she was saying. But she left anyway. Since then, he was certain. In the end, she would be just like all the others. She would leave him too. He looked at her and made a sudden proposal. What if they held hands and ran away together? A light, mysterious smile played on his lips. His offer hung in the night air, echoing off the old buildings. Vanessa laughed, surprised by his words. She teased him, asking if it was really him, River Ross, who wanted to run away. Theodore replied seriously that she was the one who spoke of running away. But Vanessa shook her head, admitting that she still didn't want anyone to get hurt because of her. She explained that if she ran away, her friends would be put under surveillance and the maids who helped her would be fired. Wanted posters of her would be put up all over Ingram, and the innocent people who helped her would be captured and punished. So instead of running away, she decided to take a different path, to ruin her reputation even more. She calmly informed him of her new plan, to start scandals with several other men besides him. Theodore stared at her, stunned, unable to believe his ears. Vanessa continued, assuring him she would make sure his name wouldn't be mentioned. She explained that men love to boast about their connections with pretty women, and if she kept quiet, the rumors would spread on their own. Once rumors of her having multiple lovers started to circulate, interest in her would quickly fade. Theodore asked bitterly if her new plan was really to get close to as many men as possible. Hearing this, he felt a sudden tightness in his chest. She was so thoroughly calculating, and yet at the same time, completely reckless, all because of this woman. Vanessa, however, oblivious to his turmoil, said that anyway, she had a wonderful time today. She thanked him for the wonderful memories, which she would never forget, but Theodore quietly called her a liar. He leaned in close and said bitterly that in a few years, she probably wouldn't even remember what he looked like. He loomed over her, his gaze filled with pain and distrust. Vanessa looked at him in surprise. Forget him? Forget this face? He looked at her with such gravity that it was almost comical. Theodore caustically remarked that she had already forgotten what the childhood River Ross looked like. Vanessa blushed and protested, insisting she remembered everything. He demanded a description. After a moment's hesitation, she said he had black hair and blue eyes, a perfect description of the real Theodore. She spoke with such shameless innocence that he almost teared up from this latest lie, which was actually the absolute truth. Vanessa laughed and asked how it could be a lie when his eyes were right there in front of her. Returning to the estate, Vanessa slipped inside, but she was immediately called out. Blair was waiting for her in the drawing room. He asked coldly what she was doing here, startling her with his presence. She asked in surprise how long he'd been there. Blair replied that Rosalind had told him Vanessa wasn't feeling well and hadn't left the mansion. He added that Rosalind was very worried about her ailment. Vanessa mumbled that she was feeling much better now. She tried to change the subject, asking how he got in. Blair replied in a frosty tone that he should be the one asking questions. For instance, Where was she coming from in that attire? His gaze was heavy and judgmental. Vanessa stammered, making excuses that it was hot and she just went for a stroll. Blair strode toward her and grabbed her by the chin. He hissed that she can't look him in the eye when she lies. He asked what she was up to, and if she had already found herself a lover. Vanessa recoiled in shock, but Blair continued, saying that he had heard rumors. That she was meeting with some sailor. His words echoed in the empty room as he held her, preventing her from leaving. She desperately tried to explain that he was just an old childhood friend she had run into by chance. Blair narrowed his eyes. He asked doubtfully if that's how friends usually behave. He yanked open the collar of her shirt, revealing the purple marks on her neck. Vanessa demanded he let her go, but Blair ignored her, asking threateningly if her uncle knew she was fooling around like this. Did he know about that Navy man? In a fury, she told him not to dare touch River. She pushed his hand away, reminding him that he had a fiancé of his own, and demanded he stop crossing the line. The line? Blair repeated with a bitter smirk. He leaned in and whispered a horrible thing. His mother had said that Vanessa had probably already lost her chastity to her uncle. He revealed that Rosalind had been furious upon hearing this and had talked back to their mother, for which she was now under house arrest. Their mother blamed Vanessa's bad influence for everything and had even tried to write to the headmistress demanding her expulsion. He moved closer, his voice dropping. He said he did all of this to get his sister out of confinement and to protect Vanessa. That was why he had no choice but to accept the engagement his mother wanted. He said painfully that she had no idea why he couldn't cross that line. In shock, Vanessa pulled away and ran out of the room, leaving him alone. Meanwhile, Blair found Theodore's cabin by the lake. He remarked sarcastically that this was where the Duke, whom the king was so desperately searching for, was hiding. He stepped inside and looked around with disdain, wondering how such a man could end up in such a lowly place. Theodore, calmly polishing a pair of scissors, looked up at the unexpected visitor without a trace of surprise. Blair stated that Vanessa genuinely believed he was an ordinary sailor. Theodore quipped that he supposed he should feel sorry about that. Blair's tone hardened. He accused Theodore of daring to delay the marriage alliance proposed by the royal family in such an insulting manner. Because of him, Blair declared, the king had become a laughingstock. Theodore mockingly praising his devotion to the royal family and suggesting he offer himself up in his place. Blair finally spoke, coldly ordering Theodore to pack his things and leave within a few days. He explained that the only reason he had stayed quiet until now was to protect Vanessa's honor. Honor? Theodore scoffed. He replied with a smirk that the lady seemed quite eager for him to ruin her honor. He added, addressing Blair by his last name, that he too had been secretly hoping for that. Blair tried to deny it, but Theodore cut him off, asking if he really thought he hadn't noticed Blair watching them like a voyeur. Theodore mercilessly exposed his motives. Blair thought Vanessa was a simple commoner who would fall into his hands easily, especially if a scandal with a low-born man ruined her life. Then perhaps one day she would end up in his bed. Am I right? Theodore finished coldly, looking directly into the stunned Blair's eyes. He added with a smirk that it must have been a great disappointment for Blair that the man she chose happened to be the Duke of Battenberg. Blair hissed that he was being insulting. Theodore, ignoring him, stated that unlike some people, he was a very busy man and asked if they were done here. But then Blair's tone changed. He earnestly asked Theodore to stop before Vanessa got hurt any further. He bowed deeply and said that she was more precious to him than anything. Raising his head, Theodore looked at Blair with defiance. He asked what exactly made the young master so good for her. After all, he would spend his whole life hiding his feelings under his mother's watchful eyes. Blair's face twisted in fury. Theodore's words had hit their mark. Theodore calmly asked if he was wrong, leaving Blair speechless and defeated. Sometime later, Rosalind was lying in her room, complaining to Vanessa that she really didn't understand her twin brother, Blair. She was indignant that he had suddenly canceled his grand tour, saying he must be out of his mind. She informed Vanessa that she would be returning to Bath with Blair soon, and they would be staying at a hotel for now. Vanessa offered to let her stay there if a hotel would be uncomfortable. Rosalind refused, saying that if they stayed any longer, their mother would storm over, as she hated them spending time together. She apologized for her bluntness, but Vanessa just smiled sadly, admitting it was the truth. Vanessa warmly recalled how much Rosalind's mother had cared for her when they were young. They had grown apart after her parents' death, but she was still grateful to her. Rosalind listened with a look of fondness and sympathy. At that moment, the recent conversation with Blair and his cruel words flashed through her mind, about their mother thinking Vanessa had already lost her purity. and that his mother blamed Vanessa for Rosalind's rebellion, even demanding her expulsion. Rosalind interrupted her thoughts, saying that luckily their mother would be quiet for a while, since Blair's wedding had been moved up. Vanessa was shocked by the news. Blair's wedding was moved up? Rosalind explained that he had no choice and was being dragged to the altar, but apparently he liked it here, since he was looking for a newlywed home nearby. She couldn't believe he wanted to start a marriage in this haunted village. Just then, a maid announced that everything was ready. Rosalind impatiently called for Vanessa to come on out. Vanessa emerged in a magnificent wedding dress and nervously asked if she looked okay. Rosalind gasped in awe, her eyes turning into hearts. She ran up to Vanessa, circling her and gushing over how beautiful she was. Then she grew somber and confessed that she wanted to go kill Vanessa's fiancé, that old Earl, right this second. Taking Vanessa's hands, she shared a superstition. If a bride's best friend is the first to see her in her veil, she'll live happily ever after. Rosalind said that even though she absolutely hated the man Vanessa was marrying, still, this once-in-a-lifetime moment for her friend. She was so glad she got to see it with her own eyes. They shared a tight hug. Vanessa sincerely thanked Rosalind. From the doorway, Blair was watching the scene unfold. He saw their sincere embrace and a storm of emotions crossed his face. Meanwhile, the Marquess Winchester was arguing with his wife. Henry Winchester is unhappy with Blair's decision to honeymoon in the South, blaming his wife for letting the children stay in Somerset. He doesn't mind their son spending time with Vanessa, but their mother, Louise Winchester, sharply cuts him off, saying that she does. She said bitterly that she absolutely hated seeing that girl hanging around their son. Henry gently turned his wife to face him. He says she always gets so worked up when it comes to Vanessa. Louise retorts with a smirk that he really has bad taste. Henry asks rhetorically if she believes that those of the same bloodline instinctively recognize each other, wondering if their children would recognize their biological father. The memory shifted many years back. Henry Winchester asked Louisa who else knew about her pregnancy. She replied that no one did, except him, Henry, and him. Henry sighs heavily, running a hand through his hair. He authoritatively states that the child in her womb is his, so their wedding will proceed as planned. He silently entered the room, interrupting a sweet moment between the two friends. Grabbing her hand, he says this is the only punishment he can inflict on her and that man. Back in the present, Blair watches the two women hugging, his face unreadable. He silently turns and walks away, leaving them alone in the bright room.